I don't think anybody can be fully prepared for the moment when you're getting a briefing on a national security issue and everybody turns to the president and says, "What are we going to do, Mr. President?" Until that moment happens, it's hard to understand the enormity of the presidency. We are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom. On 9/11, I had a lot of emotions. Mostly I was determined, and I vowed on that day that I would use all assets at my disposal within the law to protect the American people. I ask you to uphold the values of America. We're in a fight for our principles. And our first responsibility is to live by them. I decided it would help if the president showed up to a baseball game right there in New York.
We went to Yankee Stadium for the World Series. That big crowd, the first responders, the firemen and the police, we were still reeling from that terrorist attack. And it was really important to George to show that the president wasn't afraid to be there.
When I'm under the stadium warming up, and Derek Jeter, a great Yankee star, says, "Don't bounce it, they'll boo you."
The President of the United States.
So I'm thinking, don't bounce it, they'll boo you, as I walk out to the mound. The baseball felt like a shot put.
They threw a strike. And it was pretty terrific.
Baseball, the sport I love, is a part of the healing of our nation. I believe one develops a set of principles through a faith, how you're raised, and where you're raised. One of the great inheritances of my life was not only loving mother and dad, but being raised in Texas.
George and I grew up in West Texas, where people are hardworking and very solid, and there's no pretension.
Midland, Texas is a place where neighbors help neighbors. It's a place of outdoor barbecues. It's a place where Little League baseball was important. It was a great place to grow up.
And I think that influenced both of us, influenced us in the way we lived our own lives and in what we think is important.
I ran for president for a variety of reasons. One, I wanted to make sure that the economy was strong. Secondly, I felt like we needed to bolster our military in order to maintain the peace. And finally, I thought it was important to promote a culture in which each individual is responsible for his or her decisions. An education system that works, that focuses on results and achieves results, is essential to a vibrant and strong America. I'll never forget going to a high school geography class in a school outside of Houston. I asked the teacher, "What's it like to teach?" He said, "It's a miserable experience because many of the students that come to my class cannot read." Every school has a job to do, and that's to teach the basics and teach them well. If we want to make sure no child is left behind, every child must learn to read.
We truly believe that every child could learn. If people are educated, they can be successful in every other part of their lives.
One of the guiding principles of my presidency was, to whom much is given, much is required. And America is such a blessed nation that I believe we have an obligation to help relieve human suffering where we possibly can. The qualities of courage and compassion that we strive for in America also determine our conduct abroad. The American flag stands for more than our power and our interests.
George announced PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, in his 2003 State of the Union address.
Many hospitals tell people, you've got AIDS, we can't help you. Now, I fully understand that Americans were concerned when I asked Congress to spend their money on AIDS in Africa. But in life, you've got to set priorities, and a priority of saving lives is a high priority for any nation or any person.
It's a real success story, and it's largely due to the generosity of the American people.
I learned a lot from watching my dad. He was a great president and a great man. He taught me that honesty was essential, that it's important to have a set of principles that you would defend, and that it was important to listen to others. I never could have run and won for governor or run and won the presidency without the support of Laura. Well, I sometimes have a few rough edges, and she's got the capacity to polish those rough edges with her strength of character and her kindness and her loving nature.
I think George and I really are very well matched. He likes to talk. I like to listen.
I don't think you can run for office unless you care about people. I think you've got to have a belief in your soul that each individual is important. One of the great aspects of our country is that we have a culture of service. We've got millions of people who help a neighbor in need. We have people who joined the United States military after 9/11. Any commander-in-chief ought to develop a special bond with the military. Because the toughest decision a president makes is to send men and women in harm's way. I've watched our troops bravely defend our country and bravely work to spread democracy. The best hope for peace in our world is the expansion of freedom in all the world. I believe freedom is universal. I believe deep in everybody's soul is a desire to be free. I never wanted to be a wartime president. Life is going to deal you a hand you don't want to play. The question is not whether you're going to get dealt the hand, the question is how do you play it? In my case, I had a set of principles that I had developed throughout my life. And by the time I became president, I was willing to defend those principles. I love America, and I love what America stands for. And to be the president of the country I love was a huge honor. We've been through a lot together. We've met challenges and faced dangers. The state of our union is strong. Our cause in the world is right. And that cause goes on.
o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to officially welcome you to the George W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum. I'm Mike Alverson. I am a volunteer education docent here at the Bush Museum. I have been here since we opened in April of 2013, so as you can see, we've just celebrated our 11th anniversary. I'm delighted that you're here today, and I'm delighted that you're going to be attending a presentation about the Situation Room. The Situation Room that you're going to see right there and learn about is the actual conference room that was in the West Wing of the White House for over 40 years. Referred to as either the Ready Room, the Watch Room, or the Command Center, depending on which presidency over the years used it. Now let's do a little deeper dive into the actual Situation Room. What is the Situation Room? Well, it's the place where the President of the United States can have access to senior national leaders where they can get up-to-date information from literally anywhere in the world and deal with any kind of a crisis that is facing the country. Now, obviously it's located in the West Wing of the White House, a very secure location, one that is also convenient for other senior national leaders, many of whom are located in Washington, D.C. But even if someone's not geographically able to attend the meeting, there's a secure video conferencing system and very, very strong telecommunications capabilities that allow them to reach out and bring other people into the discussion. Because the crisis is not necessarily just a military threat. It could be a weather crisis, it could be a healthcare crisis, a financial crisis, anything that is a threat to the stability of the country. And the president sitting at the head of the table can be the recipient of up-to-date information, but also recommendations on how to proceed and hopefully make very sound decisions and move forward. So let's go back then in time for just a moment and take a look at how things all got started. And in 1961, it was President John F. Kennedy that created the initial Situation Room. Now, the creation of this room was very, very important throughout the national security establishment of the United States. And for that importance, we need to do a little revisit of that period in the 1950s, early 1960s. It's the height of the Cold War. The world is dominated by two major powers, the United States and the Soviet Union, each with nuclear-equipped military. And there was a great deal of tension. The dominant political theme in America during this time was the threat of communism. It permeated popular culture, the hearings, the McCarthy hearings in the Congress, and there was a great deal of tension. It was called the Cold War, but it wasn't always cold. Occasionally there would be hot spots where there would be proxy wars and activity, and there was always an underlying concern that the world could at any moment explode into some sort of nuclear war that might end the world as we know it. And that was what people who grew up in that time lived with. That's just the way the Cold War worked. Various presidents have used the Situation Room in different ways, some more than others. This is Lyndon Johnson, and you can see now that they've upgraded. Those of you maybe have parents or grandparents with a home that had an attic room or a basement, you'll recognize that kind of finishing out paneling. But we're still pinning maps up on the wall, and they're looking at this little relief table. And here's Johnson getting a briefing on the deployment of specific units around Khe Sanh, which was a strategically important place at a time during the Vietnam War of the Tet Offensive. And so the room is being used as it was envisioned The president is up to date on specific details that may have strategic implications. This is President Jimmy Carter convening a meeting of the National Security Council. I apologize for the dark photo, but the walnut paneling was in place at that time. It came in the early 70s, and it's been that look and feel until the renovation in 2006. A couple of things to note. The room is clearly meant as a small conference room with the focus on getting information to the president and his interaction with the principal national leaders. There are here some subject matter experts, but if you get 20, 22 people in that room, it's not just crowded. Honestly, it's claustrophobic, especially, given that this wall would be there. And this gives you a feel for how crowded it can be. But I'm going to turn the lights down just one notch so that I bring out the focus. Here you see President Ronald Reagan being briefed by his national security team. This is Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, Charles Gabriel, briefing Reagan and his Secretary of State and CIA Director and Chief of Staff about the raid to attack Colonel Gaddafi in Libya in response to alleged terrorist attacks against U.S. forces in Europe that had been occurring, and this is in April of 1986. And he's talking about the difficult and arduous route that had to be flown by U.S. units flying out of England because they didn't want to announce to various countries that they were on their way to Libya, and so they flew kind of right on the boundaries of the various countries. But it took a long time and multiple refuelings for that effort. Now, again, here's another president. In this case, it's Bill Clinton. Here, he's in a video teleconference with former South African President Nelson Mandela. You can see Walter Mondale, the Vice President, and Madeleine Albright, his Secretary of State. Nelson Mandela was no longer the president, but he was on his way to attend the African National Congress. And this is in February of 2000. Here are some behind-the-scenes look during the George W. Bush administration. The president would sit at the head of the table. The next most senior person, typically the vice president, if they're in attendance, would sit at the president's right. Then the next next most senior person would be to the president's left. The senior cabinet post is the Secretary of State, and so on. And they go and follow this order down to the most junior person at the foot of the table. Now, sometimes the face changes. The position doesn't change, but the face does. So here we see Marine General Peter Pace, third down on the left. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's replaced later by Air Force General Richard Myers. So new uniform, new face, but the same relative position. Sometimes people, same face, but they change positions. This is Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor. We're looking from behind her head there. But then she becomes the senior cabinet post, the Secretary of State, and now she's sitting right here at the president's left. So a little inside use of the room during the Bush administration. Again, thank you very much, and I'll turn the lights up just a little bit, and you're welcome to go home.